Example 7, Bone Density Test. Finding a z-score using table A-2. Scores of a bone density test are normally distributed with a mean of 0 and a standard deviation of 1. So they meet the requirements of a normal distribution. Find the bone density test score that separates the bottom 2.5% and find a score that separates the top 2.5%. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to draw a bell-shaped curve and identify the region under the curve that corresponds to the bottom left of 2.5%, which is equal to 0.025, and the area that corresponds to the left of the top 2.5%, which would be 1 minus 0.025. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to draw our picture. Okay, so here is our bell curve. We know that the center is the mean. Okay, and so what do we know? Well, there's two things. We know that there's going to be an area over here that's going to represent the bottom 2.5%, which is the same thing as 0.025. And then there's also an area located over here that's going to represent the top 0.025. So that means we're going to have two z-scores. We have z-score 1, we'll call that z-score 1, and then we're going to have another z-score 2. Okay, now let's go ahead and shade in those regions. So if we shade in this region, this is going to represent, again, the area of 0.025. If we shade in this area right here, we're going to see that that represents 0.025. Okay. And so what we want to do is we want to find the two z-scores. So how do we find the two z-scores? Well, one way of doing this is I'm going to redraw this graph so you can see how and what we're looking for here. Okay, so if I draw this graph, technically what I'm looking for is I want to find out, okay, over here, if this represents 0.025, and I want to find this z-score here, then that means I'm looking for the area that's to the left of that. So I'm looking for everything that's to the left over here. Okay, now how do I find that? Well, we first need to find out what is the area according to 0.025. Well, this is going to represent 1 minus 0.025. And that equals, you can see here, 0.975. Okay, so in order to find this z-score on the right, we need to look at the area of 0.9750 on the table. So what we're going to do is look at the next one here. So we're going to come down here, and we know that this is going to be a positive value because it's to the right. So let's go ahead and make sure that we have our left z-scores over here and the right z-score over here. So we're looking for the area of 0.9750. So if we take a look here, do we have a 0.9750? Well, if you look here, we do have that. Okay, so if we use here 0.9750, that means it's going to correspond to 1.96. So therefore, we're going to say that that value represents 1.96. So therefore, this z-score represents 1.96. Okay, now if we want to find this z-score, we're looking for the area that's to the left of that. So the area that's to the left of this is 0.025. So let's take a look over here and let's find 0.025. So if we keep looking here, we have 0.025. Where's 0.025? And there is 0.0250. So if you notice here, we're going to go here and then there, and that represents negative 1.96. So therefore, we have negative 1.96. And if you take a look at our values here, right, to the left here is negative 1.96. That's to the left of 0, so it should be a negative value. To the right of 0 is 1.96. So by using the table, we searched for the area to the left of 0.0250 and then found the corresponding z-score, and that corresponding z-score was negative 1.96. And then the score that's associated with the area to the left of 0.970, we got positive 1.96. Therefore, the values of z equals negative 1.96 and z is equal to 1.96 separate the bottom 2.5% and the top 2.5%. So, we would then say the following. For part 3, interpretation. So for a population of bone density test scores, 2.5% of the scores are equal to or less than negative 1.96, and 2.5% of the scores are equal to or greater than 1.96. Another interpretation is that 95% of all bone density test scores are between negative 1.96 and 1.96. Well, where are they getting this 95% from? Well, in the middle here, we're looking at the area that covers the middle. So let's go ahead and shade that area that's in the middle. Okay? And remember that the area under the curve is 1. So in order to find this area, we're going to subtract 0.025 and then another 0.025. Okay, when we take 1 and subtract that, we end up getting 1 minus 0.05, which ends up equaling 0.95. And so think about that. If you take 0.025 and add 0.95 and add 0.025, that gives you a total of 1. So therefore, again, we can say this in another way, and we just did by saying 95% of all bone density scores are between those two values.